It is the death of a dream of marriage, a dream of raising children together, how your children be raised. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are. When you come to this court, you know, your life is falling apart and you're a human.
Welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Denisa Tova. Man, I'm still smiling. It's because today's guest, she really is a force. She is a force in the world of family law. Danielle Petitti, she's a founding attorney of Petitti PLLC, a law firm. But you know, we were trying to remember if we met somewhere at one of the networking events, and you know, those superficial conversations, they really don't do anyone any justice. You can't really dig deep. But so I really cannot wait to dive deeper and get to know her story. But she's a fierce litigator. I know that much, respected advocate, and someone who's been doing matrimonial law in New York City since she was probably in her early 20s, and looks terrific. So Danielle, I cannot wait to dive in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, this is great. So, tell me about your story. How did you become a lawyer and why did you become a lawyer?
I think that I became a lawyer because I like to talk. I would say that I always say this, but it's true. You know, a lot of precocious children, one of the statements you hear from adults is, you should be a lawyer. And as you get older, it doesn't necessarily land until you start to look for a career. But at some point I was, you know, I knew I would do something, something where, you know, there's a lot of talking going on. Let's say that I couldn't see myself sitting at a desk or being in a quiet profession. So at some point I decided lawyer was it. And the rest was, I guess, kind of history.
You decided, oh, so did you have anyone in your family who was a lawyer? How did that come about?
My father worked on Wall Street, and I grew up in New Jersey in a very Wall Streety town. So there weren't so many lawyers, mainly finance, but I did not, growing up, seeing my father and the rest of the largely men work on Wall Street, it did not seem like a place for women, or at least a place that I wanted to be in at the time. This is, you know, in the 80s and 90s. So it always turned me off. I didn't like the up and down. I mean, the kind of like Wall Street insanity that was never attractive to me. I always kind of wanted something more stable. So law seemed like a more stable profession. My aunt actually was a lawyer and then a judge, an appellate judge in Virginia. So she was a little bit of an influence in that regard. But I wouldn't say that there was any like particular person. The one thing I'll say is I grew up as a Italian American with grandparents straight off the boat from Italy, and my grandparents were very insistent that everyone be educated, including the girls, which is a little bit unusual for straight off the boat Italians, especially Italians from a 2,000 person village with a third grade education. But that was the way it was, and my parents were definitely of that opinion. So there was, I guess, an expectation that, you know, if you're going to do something, you're going to be the best. You don't have to do anything. You know, you weren't forced to do one particular thing, but once you chose it, that's what you were going to commit to it. So the idea of succeeding wasn't really like, I'm not sure there was an option not to succeed. It was a matter of selecting what you intended to succeed in. I think that's a better way to say it.
Wow, it must have been a pretty lively household.
Oh yeah, you know,
Yeah.
a lot of loudness. I say that a Sunday dinner is probably where the best way to prepare for matrimonial litigation in Manhattan. I think that that dynamic, a lot of a lot of advocacy, a lot of need to be calm, you know, so good training.
Yeah, no kidding. So, I mean, if you get two people actually, well, two people, I mean, you catch people at their worst, right? At the worst of their times and their shadow side, so to speak. I mean, eventually you have to lead them toward the light. And sometimes it's not just the parties to a divorce. Sometimes you're dealing with, you know, opposing professionals who are on the other side. How do you, you know, knowing that you're such a force of energy yourself and probably have a zero patience for a bullshit, so to speak, how do you, you know, how do you deal with that? How do you bring somebody and just kind of help them stay practical?
So I think that I say this all the time. I think one of my greatest strengths is emotional intelligence. I do not think for litigation purposes, academic intelligence is necessarily the most valuable. I think being able to deal with people and have an emotional connection to them, especially in matrimonial law, and understanding what's really going on underneath it is helpful. The other thing that's helpful is I'll make another Italian reference. Teflon Don. You really have to have a thick skin. You cannot react. People have personalities. People flip out. People go crazy on you. The opposing counsel might have a bad day. They might have a really tough client. They may have a certain personality, but at the end of the day, you want to have an aggressive litigation personality, but you also need to be calm because if you're emotionally deregulated, that's not going to help your clients in a divorce situation. And I usually say, the lawyers should not be making it worse. And I think there's a lot of lawyers who sometimes make it worse. They up the ante, they interact with each other in a certain way. And that's not what we're here for. I mean, when we have to get to it and we got to go to court and we're litigating and we're arguing and especially on trial, you're going to do what you have to do. But it's not, it shouldn't be an out of control act. It should be a pointed act. So if you're aggressive, it should be on purpose, not because you're losing control. And certainly, you shouldn't be upping the ante for the clients who are already, as you said, let's be real, it's the worst time of their life often. It is, one of the most stressful times. It is their children, it is their money, it is what I call the death of a dream. It is the death of a dream, the dream of marriage, a dream of raising children together, how your children be raised. So it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how rich you are. It doesn't matter how successful you are. When you come to this court, your life is falling apart and you're a human. So it doesn't matter. It could be a lawyer, it could be a divorce lawyer for that matter. It doesn't matter. You're a human. And people tend not to react well initially. And it's our job as best we can to move them through it, not to make it worse. So I look at it from that perspective. It's not about us. It's not about our egos or our personalities. People scream at us every day, all the time, and we scream back. But ultimately, you got to kind of move it through. And the screaming should be about the case, not some type of personal attack or screaming at the other party or litigant across the courtroom.
There's something really, I'd say, special about you is you're normalizing that behavior also, as long as it is related to what's really unfolding and, not taking it personally, not making it personal. It's really fear of losing control over what you said, the money, kids. It is, and it represents so many different things. So if money represents security and freedom, it's like taking security blanket. And children, right? You suddenly are not able to provide that stability that they were used to. So it's there's a lot really. I mean, jokes aside, there's a lot that you attorneys carry, and then you have to come home and not lose yourselves in work.
Right. And you have to manage your own life, your own stresses, your own personal issues, because quite frankly, no one cares. In terms of the clients, they're going through, they can't care. It's not that they don't care, they can't care. Their life's falling apart. Their life is at crisis. Their children may have been taken. They may have been cut off of money. They may have been, a victim of domestic violence. They may have been a victim of false allegations of domestic violence and thrown out of their house. They're in an emergency. And it's our job to get that under control. That's literally what we do. So in terms of our own issues, our own lives or stresses, you really have to be able to manage it. I say to all interns, we have interns who've historically, since the beginning of time, I've always said this, you're going to be here one summer and you're going to know right away if you can stomach this or not, and not even stomach it if you want this type of life. This is not this is not for the weak. You're a shrinking violet, or you're the type of, if you're a super empath, this is probably not a good job for you, because you're going to be destroyed. You're going to go home every night and be destroyed. And you have to be able to you have to have a compassion for people and understand and care about them. And I certainly do, but you have to be able to put a mental box around it, or like any other job that handles these types of things, it will eat you alive. I think that's really a fact. And on top of it, you won't be able to be as effective for your clients because you have to keep your mind clear. If you are not clear, you are not stable in the advice you're giving or your reaction to things, you certainly can't expect the client to be. So, you're guiding the client, and you have to really try to keep the ship on course.
Yeah, that's a lot, and being a human being, you must be feeling, getting yourself triggered, several times throughout those situations. Tell me what, can you remember the last time? How have you dealt with a really tough situation? Whether it was a loss or some sort of adversity, what was it, and how do you get through it?
In like a personal level or a professional level?
Personal level.
Personal, I mean, I would say, this isn't exactly a loss, but, I was pregnant during COVID. I have a daughter, Antoinette. She's 5 years old. She was a COVID baby. So she was born September of 2020, right in the midst of COVID. When obviously I had my own law firm. And, that alone, the challenge of having a young child when you are a partner or an owner of any business, let alone a litigation practice, you have to kind of figure it out. So how I figured it out is I moved my office to the Woolworth building in Tribeca across from where I live. I would,
Smart.
right, I nursed my daughter for 15 months and I would move up my camera and I would pump. And when most of the male clients had no idea what that noise is, the female clients would always say, "Are you pumping?" And I would say, "Yes, yes, I am. Underneath my suit, I'm pumping." That's what I would do. And, I've her entire life, my life, like we've kind of surrounded in Tribeca. So I can actually participate in her existence, run to school, drop her off, take her to the pediatrician, take her to dance. So not as, not stressful in the sense of a personal issue, but stressful in the sense of, having a child. And I had a child that was 40 years old when I gave birth to her. So that's not an easy recovery
No.
compared to being young, although there's certainly benefits to being an older parent in terms of stability. And all the things I've learned through the 20 years of practice about children. But so those things I would say, I think being a working mother is probably the hardest job in the entire world. Being a mother, period, is one of the hardest jobs. Stay-at-home mothers, I think it's interesting that people try to pit working mothers against stay-at-home mothers as if there's some judgment, but the reality is there's not. I mean, being a stay-at-home mother is incredibly difficult and challenging, and being a working mother is equally challenging in a different way.
What is your pet peeve?
What is my pet peeve? My pet peeve is obnoxious, arrogant people who act like they're like the king of the world and are rude to other people based on what they think their status is, when on top of it, they really aren't even that special to start with. So New York City, by example, I say all the time, Manhattan humbles you. Manhattan humbles you. Like you come here and, I don't care, a regular professional person making in the like top one, top 5% of the 1%ers, you still nobody here. So when people like that think that there's someone, calling up and speaking to an assistant or an intern a certain way, going to a restaurant and treating waitstaff a certain way, that type of, I'm better than you attitude because of what who you think you are, what you earn. That's bad enough. But on top of it, when you cater it, back it up, you're just like some loser. That I would say is the type of person, or that's just like, and then, also batterers. I mean, domestic violence is without question, is my passion project. When I take pro bono cases, which I do, I try to take at least, one case, constantly. They're always domestic violence cases. I mean, that's what they are. And, people who batter their spouses, pet peeve, it's more like, Sicilian vengeance, like I'm going to come for you and knock your head off your shoulders. I would say that's more of the feeling, but that's from a legal perspective, that's something I feel strongly about. And I, not only, feel accomplished in terms of protecting people in that way, but also it gives me personal satisfaction. I feel personally like a personal justice when you can get someone out of those situations. And, and you're the person who is, kind of made the cycle stop, and that batter had to answer to, because often, a lot of the stuff's behind closed doors. They don't answer to anyone, and that's why they do it. They wouldn't do it in public. That's not to say that some don't, but for the most part, and it's kind of comical that it's like a female lawyer who's often younger than them who's doing it.
You got me all riled up. Yeah, and they're fucking this insignificant. I that's gotta be an amazing satisfaction. And it's Glenn hears me making these comments. He goes, "What would you do to him?" I'm like, I would step on and just wrap it around that tree. I just
Yeah, it's like, I'm just gonna take you out, like, from a legal perspective, like, there's no more, certain people, certain
yeah.
types of abusive people, there just there's nothing to say, like, you have no use. A lot of people have problems and dysfunctions, a lot of people do terrible things to each other and their children, and they do have a lot of value for their children and even their spouses. They are damaged people, they're people in hard
Yeah.
times, people with mental health issues, but not necessarily bad people, and also people that might have a lot of good intention, but sometimes act badly. Then there are people, and this is like a Catholic concept, good and evil. There are evil people. I believe that. You're just a bad person. You don't have good intentions. You never will. And you really have done things and are going to continue to do them that are harmful to your spouse and child. And, there can't be a lot of, there's not a lot of wiggle room for people like that. I will say that's rare. That's not like a common occurrence. I think most people that we deal with in divorce, they do have good intention. They just, when there's problems, they just can't get it together. They can't make it happen. But, for whatever dysfunction or struggles they have, it's not because they want to do it or they want to act that way. They just can't do it. Their own past, their own traumas, whatever it may be, drug addiction, mental health that's not treated properly. But the ones that are truly bad or just bad, like sociopathic, I don't feel real bad about going to court and kind of going to the full extreme and getting that relief.
No, you do a really great work. I want to back it up a little bit. How I know you said why you got into law. It was just that's something you needed to do. You did. So when you take yourself back, having this sort of a advocacy for someone who's um well, being battered or sort of the person that they find themselves disadvantaged, if you will. Do you remember the times, when you were, I don't know, early teens or even before then, when you were standing up for somebody? Was there an event? And when you recall that, you go, holy crap, where I am today, it's so fully aligned. It's just always been part of you.
I think that not exactly an event. I mean, I grew up in a very stable existence, I would say. I mean, I say this all the time. I grew up very privileged. I had privilege financially, privilege emotionally. I mean, I had a very supportive family. I didn't really have much to complain about or any early life experiences that I can really say much about. But I will say that I always go back to this, but like being the kind of Italian mentality of like it was ingrained in me, this like morality code of right or wrong, good or bad, the way you're supposed to conduct yourself and what is acceptable or not. And I have a very black and white view on certain things. So what is right or wrong? There are certain things that I just do not, there's no like gray buffer for me. It's just right or wrong. And I think that kind of flows into this, people that are truly abusive, and I don't mean like, like I said, towards the end of a marriage, I think lots of people act abusive-ish.
Right.
There's incidents. That's not the same as cycles of conduct throughout a marriage, and how you treat someone or even before the marriage. So those types of people, I think I just view it as like it is really wrong. Like I said, you were a bad person, you have bad intentions, and that this is kind of what happens right in the universe, that people have to if you believe in those things, you have to be the one to try to do the good. And this is also something in matrimonial law. I mean, most of my cases at this point are high net worth cases, dealing a lot with money. And for me, like, I want to continue to always have some aspect of what I do in my practice where I feel like I'm doing something real and good in the world. That gives me personal satisfaction aside from making a good living and being a good lawyer, which of course, everyone professionally, you take pride in your work and you pull in your identity from your work in some capacity. But I think putting something into the world that's more than money or more than success is important for everyone, or it should be important. And for me, that's a part of it that I take a personal satisfaction. So I think that's kind of the gist of what has attracted me to it.
Do you have a team? Or is it
I
as
do.
far as your firm?
I have a senior counsel and I have an associate, I have an assistant, but I'm small. I'm a small firm on purpose. I started off with Patricia Firsch, who I believe has been on your show. I was a first year law student intern with her. So I have literally been in matrimonial law, as you said, since I was 22 years old. In fact, Judge Drager and Judge Gish taught a class at New York Law School called The Anatomy of a New York Divorce. I was their first student. At, I think
Wow.
maybe it was 23 at the time, but that's literally how long, and I'm 45 now. So a very long time in this. And, you know, I kind of moved up the ranks with Pat. I eventually became a partner when I was 30, so relatively young and
Wow.
pretty young, I guess, for a lawyer. And we, you know, we had a law firm for 10 years, and then right before COVID, I went on my own. And you know, I like the small structure. I don't want to join a large firm. Most of my friends at the large firms have repeatedly asked me to join, and the joke is always not a chance in hell. Like that's what the oldest will say. She will never. But you know, I've always been a small firm, and I don't want to be a big firm. I like the control of my life. I like, for example, my office. You can see behind me. This is what I decorated when I built up my office. You don't see things like this in people's office because
No.
corporate structure doesn't really allow for English barrister decor, but that is something that I enjoy.
Love
I also often co-counsel with larger firms. I am very close friends with many matrimonial lawyers who are approximately my age. So if I get a large case, which I often do, I get cases comparable to all the large firms. I'm lucky that my career is built that way. And if I think that I need to bring on co-counsel, I'll bring on someone. I'll, you know, think of who I want, and then I'll call them and say, "Hey, I got this case. You want to come on?" And you know, they always say yes. So if I need to bring on more bodies, I know where to go to bring them on.
when you're bringing in more bodies, not necessarily just to co-counsel in a case, but if you were to, or when you do hire, you know, what are some of the things you're looking to hear or see in people before you make that decision? What's important to you?
Maturity, you know, for sure, you know, caring about the clients. You know, this isn't Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. These are people. You know, there's no such thing as it's 5 o'clock. I want to go to happy hour when your client got punched in the face. It doesn't exist. You know, and it shouldn't exist just because your boss is telling you it exists. You have to feel an obligation to the client, to the people. These are people, these are children. And if you don't care about them, and again, like I'm a very financially focused person. I am not someone who could ever have not made money. End of story. Plain and simple. However, money is not the most important thing in life. And anyone who starts to get where they think money is more important than people, that's a problem for me because that's not true. And it can both be true. You can value money and want nice things and also care more about people. So they're not independent concepts. So certainly someone who gets that, right? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, we're here to grind, we're here to make money, but you know, first and foremost, we're here to make sure our clients are okay. And that's it. And that we have an obligation to them. And if you don't take it seriously, don't do this. Go do something else. And you know, that they want to have a career, I guess. You know, one thing I see often these days is young lawyers, they want to have a job. They don't really want to have a career. And you know, this is not the type of law you should be going into if you don't want a
No.
career, because it's not a 9 to 5, you know, for the exact same reasons. You know, there are emergencies all the time. There are things that happen constantly. You have to shift your life and schedule. So, you know, I think you have to really want to do this. And then the last thing I'd say is, you know, you have to have a certain personality. If you can't deal, you can't deal with people. If you don't have a thick skin, if you're gonna cry constantly, like, and you know, there are sometimes you cry. I mean, there are horrible things you hear. I mean, I've been in court where everyone's been crying. It's horrible testimony. You know, there are moments that are so palpable that, you know, I don't care who you are, you know, man, woman, judge, people cry. The toughest people, you're going to tear up. It's terrible. But, you know, if you're going to cry when you get yelled at, you know, you're getting yelled at every single day by a client, an opposing counsel, a judge, like someone's going to yell at you, and you're going to have to just kind of go with the flow and also learn how to kind of turn it around. You know, you're not going to be combative
Yes.
constantly. That's not a good skill. So you have to learn to interact with people even when you're under fire. And I don't think a lot of people have that personality, especially, listen, a lot of academic people don't have that personality. So it's the right fit of, like, you know, emotional intelligence and smart. You know, you don't have to be the smartest attorney in the room, but you have to be intelligent, have, you know, reasonable reading, writing, and research skills to do any litigation, certainly matrimonial law. But you also have to have, you know, emotional intelligence. I think that's the skill for this type of law. That is the primary type of intelligence. If you have it in high amounts, you're probably going to do pretty well, assuming you have, you know, a reasonably average amount of the rest of it.
I love what you said because there's this the chatter about AI replacing this or that. And I think people who will stand out are those who do have the emotional intelligence and the common sense, because the stuff that you can automate and recreate, so to speak, the research and all that eventually, right? But when it comes to sitting across a client who's just been battered or is just going through the transition, you can't replace that, that human being and sort of helping them navigate those times. So, and like you said, this is not a 9 to 5. This is definitely and I love when, and maybe you would say that, but I've had, no, this is probably, we've done over 100 of these episodes, but what was really interesting is when I asked, well, how do you go through your emotional reset and not carry this home? So one of the words that stand out is, well, I compartmentalize. I'm like, bullshit. You're not a robot. Right? I mean, so there's got to be a reset button, but sounds to me like what is what and why and where you stand in relation to what is happening and unfolding in front of you, and you're not afraid to lean into it.
Yeah, I think anyone who says that they don't always think about these cases or their days when they go home, it's impossible. I think the key
Yeah.
is managing it and not in all instances taking it home with you. So, for example, a judge yelling at you or an opposing counsel being obnoxious, you better get over that real quick. That can't come home with you. Maybe 1 out of 20 times that comes home with you if it's really bad. And even then, you kind of laugh about it, or you say, oh, this was ridiculous. But if you're going to bring that home, you're going to have problems in this area. It's going to eat at you because that's your life. I think the terrible things that you witness or hear about, especially involving children or domestic violence, some of these things, again, you're not getting away from it. It's going to be on your mind. I mean, I had a case once where I had to have a client go through horrible, basically it was marital rape were part of the allegations for, getting an order of protection amongst other allegations. And, it was horrible. I couldn't even really, when she started testifying, I could barely even speak. I mean, I was like, just going to start crying. And the judge, who is now an appellate division judge, I'll say that, who was only in the matrimonial part for a split second, but later had said to me that, she couldn't sleep all weekend. She went home and just, could not sleep because it was just so absolutely horrible. And the clerk also said to me, who's been there for his whole career, I think he retired now, he said he's never, it was so disturbing to hear the allegations, even now I have chills. It's just so terrible. So those things, you're not going to get around them and you're not going to forget them, you're not. But, she got an order of protection. She was able to relocate with her children to where her family lived. He has no contact or access with them, nor should he. He was also physically abusive to the children. So, the result was full protection and the, court system worked as it should, but the emotional impact of that, it's, you're not getting away from it. You're gonna have to process it. So what do? I don't know, you have a glass of wine, you go work out, you get a massage, I don't know, you cry, whatever you do, you
All
talk
of the
about
above.
therapist, you talk about it, without disclosing privilege with your therapist. I mean, I think all divorce lawyers I think anyone in this type of law should be in therapy just to talk about and process these things. I mean, I think that, that makes sense. These are not kind of normal things. These are not things that you're supposed to be able to emotionally process, like, lickety split, snap your fingers. So, and especially if you're doing this type of thing, not every divorce lawyer does these types of cases. A lot of the firms maybe stick more towards the financial cases, but there are a lot of us who do them. And also sometimes you have big money cases that have a component that is like this and you can't get around it and you have to deal with it, because if it happens during the case and you're already on the case, if you're comfortable or not handling this, you're handling it because you're the lawyer.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Hey, completely separate. What do you do when you're not, when you're not working, like truly you shutting off, and what do you enjoy doing?
What I enjoy doing. So other than obviously things that 5-year-olds do when I'm with my
Yeah.
daughter, the normal mothering things that, everyone does. For me, myself, I enjoy going to spas. I like going to the Berkshires. I like going to Miraval Spa. That's something I've been doing the last few years. I go by myself once or twice a year for 3 nights, and which I've never done historically. I've never been like an alone vacationer, but I started doing that after I was on a huge trial. And it was like, I don't know, day whatever, we had a lull. And I said, I think I'm like hearing voices. Like I really am losing my mind. Like I need to go someplace where they like
Yeah.
do some type of chakra something or another, like which I've never done before, although I did it there. And I have to say, I some of those things I really enjoyed, like the sound wave therapy, hitting the bowls, the meditation, very relaxing. So I like those types of things. I like antiquing. I have a house in Connecticut, a country home in Connecticut that I have been, renovated and have been decorating. I really enjoy just shopping for antiques. I would say that, shopaholic, pretty much any type of shopping, but certainly home goods I've gotten older is a thing that I enjoy. I like fine dining, going out with friends and, having a nice glass of wine, certainly enjoy that. I would say those are the basic things I do. I know you are a big workout component. I do not like to work out. However, I do. I would not call that enjoyable. I call that like necessary maintenance, but I hate it. So not an enjoyable. I know, like, not enjoyable, but something I do. That does help me, I will say, for stress in terms of, definitely working out is a helpful stress relief. So not enjoyable at the time, but certainly the same effect, right? Whatever the dopamine release, so to
Yeah.
speak. Um, so those are, and then also I like to do nothing. I like to sit at home and watch Netflix and cheesy television. I like to be mindless. Shop on Marshalls.com while I'm watching the newest Netflix horrible reality, Love Is Blind series. That would be, at which I feel like, look, our lives are so intellectual day by day. I have no shame. Like I don't care. That's what I like to do. It's like just turn off your brain, buy some discount luxury items online while you're watching some like horrible, cheesy, dubbed over, Love Is Blind from some foreign country. It's not a bad Friday night sometimes.
And a stand-up comedy too. Oh my God. You're cracking me up, but you just hit so many spots. It is so true. I can't even talk to make the record straight. I don't always love working out. Yeah. I mean, when I was actually, I got into the bodybuilding. It was like in a late
I mean, you're
30s.
really good at it. So there's
Well, okay, see, now I have a system. I know. I don't ask my feeling how I feel. I just do it, and that's it. And yeah, and it is a form of meditation, kind of just like to feel when it's a little heavier, it just kind of like fills you up and takes you away. But I know I love the mindless shit. I love that too. I was just gonna ask you, like, what are you binging
Oh God.
on?
I mean,
Yeah.
anything horrible on Netflix or any of these like shows. I mean, Love Is Blind, all of them. I mean, literally I've watched every like country. That show I think is just hilarious, but I like to like fast forward through the pods until they get to the
Yeah.
place where they see each other and see their reactions. That's like my most favorite. Obviously the Real Housewives. I mean, the Real
Yeah.
Housewives of New York, of course, was the classic, was always, my go-to, but or I'll watch like, I have go-to things I watch. The Bridget Jones Diary, I'll rewatch Sex in the City. There, there's always a theme to things I watch. It's always like some city girl in her 30s romping around. Like, they
Yeah.
always have the same theme. Or Pride and Prejudice with Keira Knightley is another rewatch. The Holiday, the one where they're in yeah, she goes to England in the cottage with Jude Law.
Yes.
So there's a lot of repetitiveness of the movies over the years that I'll rewatch depending on my mood. But yeah, Bridget Jones' Diary is definitely a big one. I mean, I've watched that so many times, it's like probably really disturbing.
She's great. And actually, Keira Knightley, she was in it was like oh my God, it was like a thriller, actually. It was interesting to see her in that role. We just watched it. What the hell was it? It was oh yeah, it was almost like a White Lotus-ish. I don't
Oh,
know if you
really?
saw that.
White Lotus was good. I've watched all of those. I watch a lot of the like, when the good stuff comes out on HBO, like the good series, I watch those. I watch Bridgerton. I mean, I've watched everything. Like basically, like late at night after my daughter goes to bed, if I'm not working, I'm home. She's sleeping. So like, what am I gonna do? And
Right.
I try not to work at night, like every night. Like I try to like relax because I find that the time frames I have to do that, which are usually trial time frames, you just get burned out, you do.
Yeah.
So the mindlessness, you need to turn off your brain. And then speaking of Miraval, I mean, the best thing that ever came from my chakra readings at Miraval was the chakra girl said to me with some card, she said, "Don't live in a prison of your own creation." And that was literally the most mind-blowing statement I think anyone has said to me in my entire life, because that's basically, I think, me. I compete with myself 24/7. And then sometimes, recently I've started to think, who is making you do these things? Yourself? Like,
That's
you
funny.
know, who are you competing with? Danielle Petitti? I think that she probably would be okay if you didn't, so.
That is so funny. I love that spot. Oh, it's so beautiful out there. And you almost like you hear yourself think. You don't want to think, but stuff comes into your mind. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like, this
well,
is great.
they Miraval, whoever does their, I don't know what profession this is, but they have it set up. I mean, obviously this isn't a corporate wellness thing. They've all
Yeah.
must have all the data on it. They pipe music everywhere, even the music, even like the scent, everything they do there. It's like I said, it's like crack cocaine. It's like insane. You're there and you're
Yeah.
just, like everything feels good. It's just crazy. I mean, the food they have, everything is like super healthy, but it's like healthy, but it's not.
Boring. It's not
Yeah, it's
boring.
not.
Yeah.
It's like they have like a crudité with like every crispy vegetable you could ever imagine with like every dip. So it's not necessarily like super low calorie, but it's healthy. Or like they'll have like all these fresh breads like made from local artisans. It's still bread, but it's like,
Ugh.
everything is kind of geared towards health, but not like, not in a way that you wouldn't want to eat it. So that's the whole thing. They serve alcohol. That's the big distinction between Canyon Ranch and Miraval, which I didn't go. I've never been to Canyon Ranch because I just think it's not I imagine from what I've read about it, I need more of the Miraval balance. But yeah, no. But yeah, you get. They have all types of workout classes. I of course didn't do a real workout class, but I did do the roller classes. Two foam roller classes for stretching. That seemed like a good lawyer class to take. How to stretch your back after sitting for 18 hours,
Oh my God.
which I enjoy the foam roller. But then, the spa treatments, that's what I really like. I mean, get like 1,000 massages, a bunch of
Ugh.
facial, just scrub your whole body down with like, some amazing aromatherapy, salt oil. I mean, that's like, that's really like I love spa stuff. That's like
You know
massages.
what? We need to start a reality show right here. That's a real talk. There's like this air of mystery around lawyers and it's like, you talk about life and think about life in so many really just same things as everybody else does. And and I love this. That's, and admitting, yeah, I just want a mental floss right now. That's it. I don't want to think about anything. This is what I want. And this is what it takes to get reset. It doesn't have to be anything sophisticated or weird or complicated. That's my
No,
moment right here. Yeah, I love it.
yeah, no,
That's
it isn't.
honest.
It's just, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, like, I say this all the time to clients. We're people. I'm a
Yeah.
human. I know you think that like they often think we're robots or we're God or whatever. No, we're not. We're humans. And also like we have lives. We have, and we have to set boundaries also. It's hard when you're building a career and you're younger to set boundaries, but as you get older, you realize that you really have to set boundaries. And if you do a good job and you work hard and you build a client base, they will respect the boundaries because they want you. They want you to be their lawyer. And also, if you don't set the boundaries, you're never going to have boundaries with anyone. And that's not really a good quality of life. So,
No.
we don't have boundaries like regular professionals to start with by the nature of what we do. So you have to have some boundaries like, oh, I'm with my daughter, we're going to a play, and some clients calling to discuss, to go through a financial affidavit. No, we can do this on Monday. Like this isn't, you calling me to tell me you got punched in the face or your kid was taken. That's a very different circumstance. But,
Yeah.
of course, then it has to be dealt with, but to the extent we can on a Saturday. But, but otherwise you have to kind of say, are people texting you at 12 o'clock at night? This isn't a text message conversation.
Yeah.
You text me late at night, again, did something really terrible happen? If not, why are you texting me in the middle of the night? Or why are you texting me at 6 in the morning on a Saturday to ask me when your court date is? Like, that's probably not appropriate.
Yeah.
That's not
No.
a good use of your 6 a.m. text message privilege. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is honest. This is great. Well, listen, I know I'm going to have you back. You have a great flow of energy. This is so enjoyable. And thank you so much. This was really,
of
really,
course,
really
thank
great stuff.
you.
Yeah. And and sharing yourself so openly. And I think it's a really powerful reminder that, there's a strategy. We talked about that, but that there's the strength being and having the emotional intelligence and just being a human being. I just think that goes hand in hand. No wonder you're so successful. So to our listeners and our viewers who want to get a hold of fabulous Danielle Petitti, there's a link to her bio below so that you know how to get a hold of her. And please follow us on all social media channels and Beyond the Bar podcast. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.